young immigrants. Stay with us. What about the dreamers? What about people who came here when they were children?
The dreamers, it's a tough situation.
Should they have to leave
They have to be legally. They're with their parents. It depends. It sounds cold and it sounds hard. We have a country. Our country's going to hell. We have to have a system where people are legally in our country.
It was more than 2 years ago when Donald Trump was beginning his presidential run. You heard him vowing to both end the program known as DACA, but also saying he wants to treat dreamers, young people who came to this country illegally with their parents, with great heart. Now, the White House is admitting the decision, which is supposed to be announced by Tuesday, has been weighing on him. And let's discuss that. Our panel is back with us. Thanks for coming back and sticking with us. Senator, you were involved in a lot of intra-Republican fights in your time in Congress about immigration. How do you see this playing out?
Well, look, I hope the president abides by the rule of law, which is that the law does not allow him, any president, to uniformly just to stop enforcing the law. And so I think hopefully he will enforce the law and say that there's an opportunity here for some sort of deal to be worked out where the president gets something that he wants, and I think the American public wants, which is better border enforcement, whether that means a wall or increased funding for border security, maybe in exchange for some sort of program on these, quote, dreamers. But for the president to just act unilaterally is wrong, number one. Number two, you've heard members of Congress, both parties, saying we need to do something about this. Fine. I think the president should work with them to do something, but should get something that the American public wants, which is no changes in our immigration policy until we secure the border.
We don't have an immigration policy.
Excuse me, Secretary, I want you to respond, but as you do, I want our viewers to have the context that you worked for George W. Bush,
yes,
the last Republican president, to try to get comprehensive immigration
That's
reform.
right. That's right. So the idea of the DACA being unconstitutional, a lot of presidents have used the idea of deferred action. So if you think it's unconstitutional, let's make it a law. Let's fix it. And that would be, as some people are working today, passing a DREAM Act or passing a Bridge Act that will get you to a DREAM Act. But look, we've had a love-hate relationship with immigration. We had our 1924 immigration quotas. We had the Chinese Exclusion Act. I think this decision, if the decision is let's deport these kids, I think this would be one of the most notorious immigration decisions in our history, and I think it would be a permanent stain, a permanent blemish on the U.S. forever.
Congresswoman, you are currently serving in the House of Representatives, and the House Speaker, the Republican House Speaker, is trying to get the president not to act unilaterally and instead let Congress handle it. Let's listen.
I mean, I actually don't think he should do that, and I believe that this is something that Congress has to fix.
Okay, let's get real. The reason why this program is in place, in the first place, done by executive decision by President Obama, is because Congress can't get its act together on immigration. How realistic do you think it is?
For years and to present and pass legislation for comprehensive immigration reform. Actually, in 2010, I believe, we passed the DREAM Act for our young people, and it got stalled in the Senate. But let me just say, first of all, this decision should be weighing on the president very, very heavily. It is wrong to create this kind of anxiety, these mixed messages. First of all, it's creating fear, anxiety. Our young people here, 800,000 of them, are worried to death about what's going to happen to them. They've played by the rules. They've gone to school. They've contributed to the economy. They're Americans. And we have legislation. Congresswoman Lucille Roybal Allard and Congresswoman Ileana Ross-Layton have presented legislation. We know we can get this passed in a bipartisan way, and so we should do that. But in the meantime, we should not allow the anxiety and the fears of these children to continue, and the president should do the right thing and not do it.
Just a few things here. First of all, there are 124,000 dreamers in Texas right now who are living with the anxiety that they're going to have to, they could be uprooted from their families. The average age of dreamers is 6 years old when they came over. They are here because of the decisions of their parents, not because of their own decisions. For most of them, this is the only country that they know. So as it would be heartless, in fact, to take them away. And just to respond to Senator Santorum, the issue here is every president has made decisions about the prioritization of what they're going to do on immigration. If you listen to Donald Trump, he says he wants to get rid of criminals. These are not criminals. These are people who are in school. They are working. 90% of them have jobs. These are people who are contributing. So the idea that the president can't say, you know, I'm going to prioritize other people in this process is wrong. And that's why courts have upheld us. We are dealing with an artificial deadline. It is only a bunch of AGs who are threatening to sue. He could say, let's see how it goes in the courts. But in the meantime, Congress should act, and he should get behind that action.
With all due respect, prioritization is not saying you can't remove somebody. There's a big difference, and to conflate the two is completely wrong.
That's fine.
You're not telling the truth.
I mean,
you're just really not.
But that's fine.
The reality is, the president can in fact prioritize who he's going to remove, but that's not what DACA does.
Let's just say that you have this argument that it is not constitutional. But we agree that we need to save these kids. These kids are Americans. They don't know how to speak Spanish. They have American values. They play Little League. They are as American as anyone else. And to kick them out, so let's change the law. But is it a matter of we don't think it's constitutional, or are there people in this country who feel threatened by immigration, who feel threatened that people who look different than we do are coming in? Let's talk about it, because that's what's happening.
With all due respect, to suggest that people who want to limit immigration in this country, we have record levels of legal immigration.
And it's still enough.
We have over 1 million people a year, more than any time in the history of this country. We have the largest percentage of immigrants, almost tied with the historical high as the percentage of immigrants living in this country. We have on absolute numbers by far the most immigrants in this country. To suggest that anyone who wants to have a policy, we need to examine this to see the impact on working men and women in this country whose wages have been depressed for 20 years.
But that's not immigrants' fault. You're blaming it on immigrants.
I'm not blaming it on immigrants. Excuse me. I'm not blaming it on
you are.
What I am saying is that it is irrational for us to have a discussion. And for anyone to suggest that we can't have a discussion and somehow you're a bigot when you do so is offensive to a whole bunch of
What I am saying is that there are people who feel threatened by immigrants. And they're using this concept of unconstitutional as a shield. Let me tell you something, Jeff, if I can just say one thing. An economy grows with the number of workers in the economy and the productivity of those economy. Our native-born workforce is not growing fast enough to grow the economy.
Well, let's talk
without immigration, we cannot grow.
Rick, wait a minute. You're forgetting about the moral.
But to suggest that the immigration patterns that we have today is beneficial to America is a legitimate discussion.
No.
And
We don't have enough. The reason legal...
Hey, you guys, wait a minute.
Yes.
Go ahead,
We have a moral and ethical responsibility to try to keep families together, not tear them apart. Secondly, you know, I'm thinking of do unto others as you would have them do unto you. What about my children, my grandchildren, hanging in limbo like this, given all of the dynamics that this administration has been, and the anxiety they've created? And so minimally, we should say, no, we're not going to.
What if there is a deal in the works to say, let the dreamers stay, and in return, the president gets his money for his wall?
Heavens no. First of all, young people should not be held hostage.
Yeah, that's right. This is like a ransom.
Racist, backwards
It's not a bargaining chip.
I'm not opposing the deal. I'm just saying it's out there.
I appreciate that Rick Santorum and Donald Trump want to use 800,000 people's lives as a bargaining chip for a unnecessary wall or other things. But that's not what leadership is. Leadership is actually saying what's right or wrong to do. And the fact that if you think it's wrong, don't use them as a bargaining chip. If you think it's right, don't use them as a bargaining chip.
I just want to add something to that, because a lot of people will be saying this is a leadership moment for the president, and if he makes a tough decision to get rid of DACA, then he's showing leadership. Real leadership for the president would be to go up against his base and say, my wisdom, my sense of American values tells me that this is wrong. That would be leadership.
What would be leadership is the president enforcing the law instead of the president seeing himself above the law. We had a president in the past the last president to do that on a routine basis. This president hopefully will obey the law. If the president wants to put forward an option to go to the Congress to fix this, as I will remind my Democratic colleagues here, President Obama had a Democratic Congress, and, well, I'm talking to these two, my Democratic colleagues, that President Obama had 2 years, we had complete control of the House and Senate, and didn't move any DACA, didn't move anything. So the idea that there is now this outrage that Republicans are not cooperating, you know what the deal has always been. Border security first. Republicans have said that from the very beginning. We have not gotten that. We need to get that.
In fairness, Democrats and Republicans tried to get the Dreamers through, and it didn't work.
Right.
But that's
not when the president had control. When the president had control, and when Democrats controlled in 2009 and 2010, the president did nothing on this issue.
But there's one. But neither the other presidents. There's one simple.
Doesn't matter. We didn't have control. They had control.
There's one simple insight here. There's one simple insight here. The reason we have undocumented workers is because our laws do not serve our economy. And that is the problem. And unless Congress acts and the executive branch acts, our laws don't work. We need 1 million people in farming.
We don't enforce our laws.
Okay, but we're actually
our laws
DACA.
Don't work. We don't have enough immigrants coming in.
DACA isn't actually about undocumented immigrants. DACA is actually about people who were brought here, kids who've been brought here. They've actually gone through the system. They've given their addresses. They're not living in the shadows. They're people who've actually said, I'm going to register essentially with the federal government. And now President Trump is threatening to use the information that they have voluntarily given to the administration, to the executive branch, to police them out of the country.
So what possible reason for someone? Look, I'm a compassionate. I have 7 children. I'm concerned about kids. So why would I be opposed to something like this? And the reason is very simple. The reason I'm opposed to DACA is because of the unintended consequences of doing this very compassionate act that we've seen over and over again. And that is, when we give amnesty to a group of people, what do? You encourage more people to come over. Because then you will say, look, if you
change the law so that they don't need to come over.
This is not giving amnesty. What we're saying is they deserve a path to citizenship, and we're giving them.
You're using all the buzzwords, Rick.
They didn't play by the rules, and they met all the criteria.
I'm used to 3 on 1. I have 7 kids, so I know all about it. So the bottom line is there are unintended consequences to this what sounds to be very humane act, which is to encourage more parents and more children to come over here and illegally get into this country because they know that once they get here, that we'll be compassionate.
All right. We've got your rest. The only way to discourage illegal immigration is by changing our laws so that
to just open our borders, aren't you?
No. Let me give you an example.
Okay,
let me give you an
example. Mr. Secretary, how many more do we need?
We
2
need
million? 3 million?
I don't know.
5
the
million.
marketplace will tell us that.
Million.
Hold on a second.
So open
we
the borders
need,
to how many
we need 1 million farmers.
No one is
we need 1 million farm workers in the country.
Give me a number.
1 million more farmers. Oh, stop it. We need 1 million farm workers in the country.
You want to negotiate the law? Negotiate the law. Don't use platitudes.
How do you? I'm talking numbers. You're talking
what about family values?
You don't understand how the economy works. This whole idea of
guys, I think that the audience can hear you better.
Yeah.
Very important arguments if you speak one at a time.
How many more?
Hold on, how many more? Let me just tell you one example, okay? We need about 1 million farm workers, people to pick lettuce, people to go out and pick
we should
tomatoes.
have a program that allows temporary workers.
That's what I'm saying. We should have a program, but we don't. And because we don't have a program, hundreds of thousands come in illegally. That's the point I'm making.
What about family values?
Why are we talking
What about keeping families together? We're talking about a policy that destroys families, that keeps families apart. We need to make sure that whatever decision the president makes, hopefully he'll do the right thing, is a way to keep families together, keep our young people here who have played by the rules, and support, and I think we do have bipartisan support, for an effort to pass a bill that would allow
I think Rick agrees with comprehensive immigration.
I want to ask just going to raw politics. We talk a lot about the policy. If President Trump doesn't keep his promise, what will your base, the conservative base, do? Will they retaliate against him?
I mean, I can't predict that. I think there's a lot of folks who will be very disappointed because the president has made the focus on immigration to be about making sure that American workers have the opportunity to get good paying jobs and to see their wages increase. We've seen an increase in employment. We've seen an increase in wages. It's not been as robust as the president likes. Like it or not, about several 100,000 of these dreamers are actually working in the workplace right now. You can make the argument they're taking jobs away from other folks who would be working. You can say, no, that's not the case. But the bottom line is there are a lot of people in this country who believe that that is the case, and the president has to account for that.
Okay, if anybody had any doubt why this is tough, they don't now after watching this. This is just